I remember standing in Diane's living room, my legs trembling. I held my newborn son, Liam, close to my chest. Diane waved a white envelope in my face, her eyes cold. She didn't even give me a chance to sit. The air felt like ice. Tom, my husband, stood in the corner. He looked pale, like he wanted to disappear. Then Diane spoke, her voice shaking with fury. "We had your baby tested. He's not Tom's." She threw the envelope on the coffee table. I saw the words, "DNA result," scribbled on the side. My heart pounded so hard that my ears rang. "This is the proof I've been waiting for," she hissed. "You're the trash I always knew you were. Thank God my son finally sees it." Tom wouldn't look at me. It felt like I was in a nightmare. Liam let out a soft cry, and my arms tightened around him. I wanted to scream that this test was wrong, but my throat burned. Diane's final words before I left still cut me to this day. "Get out of my house." I stumbled out the door, tears streaming, wondering how things had gone so horribly wrong. I held my baby in the driveway, banished and confused, with no idea how I would prove my son's true paternity. Back at our tiny apartment, my hands were shaking too much to even make a bottle. I grabbed my phone and texted Tom. "Meet me now. I need answers." He came over an hour later, looking wrecked. As soon as the door shut, I demanded the truth. Tom sighed and confessed that Diane wouldn't stop questioning Liam's red hair. "Everyone in my family has jet black hair," he said, rubbing his temple. "My grandparents, my siblings, even the grandkids. But then our baby comes out with bright red hair?" Mom wouldn't let it go. He admitted she pushed him to do a paternity test, but he never got around to it. Apparently, Diane got impatient and took matters into her own hands. She used an old toothbrush of Tom's, the one he'd left at her house long ago, to collect his DNA. I felt sick. All those days she'd smiled at me, secretly plotting to label me a cheater. The humiliation burned my cheeks. "I didn't think she'd actually do it," Tom said, voice small. But his guilt hung in the room. My anger turned white-hot. If Diane forged this so-called proof, I needed a real test, one that would slam the truth in her face. The next morning, I strapped Liam into his car seat and drove straight to a proper DNA testing center. Everything about the place felt sterile and official. The fluorescent lights, the spotless floors, the serious faces. A lab tech welcomed me, verified my identity, and explained how their chain of custody worked. "We need to see both parents or have notarized permission," she said, clearly used to messy family disputes. I called Tom right there. He showed up, still looking like he'd slept in the same clothes. He gave the lab permission and swabbed his cheek, while I held Liam steady for his swab. The tech gently told me that the test Diane did likely had no legal standing. "People think they can just send in a random sample," she said, "but there's a reason we have strict procedures." My heart fluttered with hope. If this new test proved Tom was Liam's father, Diane's lies would unravel. Yet part of me was nervous. What if Tom doubted me forever? I cradled Liam, kissing his forehead. I was determined to clear my name, no matter how long it took. As we left, the lab tech casually mentioned that Diane's old toothbrush submission was too degraded to be reliable. That single detail lit a fire inside me. I'd never checked my phone so obsessively. Every buzz made me jump. Finally, a week later, the lab emailed me the official results. I locked myself in the bedroom, heart thumping, and opened the PDF. Tom is 99.99% likely to be Liam's father. Relief flooded my entire body. For the first time in days, I could breathe. I immediately forwarded the email to Tom, adding no message. I let the truth speak for itself. Hours passed with no response. My text to Tom stayed unread. Meanwhile, my phone started lighting up with group chat notifications. My cousin sent me a screenshot. Diane was calling me a liar again, claiming I somehow forged these new results. The gall of it all made my blood boil. I texted Tom, "Are you seeing what your mother is spreading? I have proof. Where are you?" Silence. I felt crushed, furious, and exhausted. I kept checking the time, waiting, hoping Tom would have the guts to stand up for me publicly. By midnight, he still hadn't replied. Diane's lies spread like wildfire, and I realized I might be on my own. My phone buzzed nonstop the next morning with messages from distant relatives and even old neighbors. Diane had apparently gone on a calling spree. Over and over, she repeated the same line. "There's no redhead in our family. That girl is lying and trying to trap my son." I felt like I was living someone else's nightmare. People who barely knew me were texting things like, "Hey, I heard some drama with the baby. What's going on?" My Aunt Lucy, who always had my back, called me in tears. She said Diane told her flat out that Liam belonged to some other man I used to date. That wasn't even close to the truth, but now rumors swirled in every direction. My cousin Stephanie forwarded screenshots from a massive group chat of Tom's extended family. Diane wrote, "I have proof that baby isn't Tom's. Lena is desperate and forging new tests." It felt like a betrayal on top of betrayal. I looked at Liam dozing in his bassinet, clueless to the storm raging around him. I decided right then I wouldn't just sit back. I would fight back, legally if needed. I met with a lawyer the very next day. Her office smelled like fresh coffee and leather. She listened calmly as I poured out the entire story, from Diane's obsession with Liam's hair to the false test results. She paused, took a deep breath, and said, "We can send a cease and desist letter for defamation, but we should also consider your custody arrangement. Her harassment is emotional abuse, not just for you, but for your child." The word defamation felt heavy, but it also felt like justice. My lawyer drafted the letter immediately, stating that Diane had to stop spreading lies or face legal consequences. Soon after, I went back to the house Tom and I had once shared. He'd moved out a week before all this blew up, and we hadn't officially sorted custody yet. I needed diapers, Liam's old blankets, and some personal documents. I opened the nursery closet to grab a box of baby clothes, and something caught my eye behind the shelf. It was a small camera, half hidden by a stuffed giraffe. My heart pounded as I pulled it out. I realized Diane had been spying on me in my own home. My hands shook as I examined the tiny camera. It had a little memory card inside. I slid the card into my laptop, nearly dropping it from nerves. The footage was disturbing. I saw Diane letting herself into our house with a key. She rummaged through my dresser drawers, lifted my journal, snapped photos of my prescription bottles. I heard her muttering in a low voice, "She's not mother material. That poor baby needs a real home." I pressed pause, feeling sick. I pictured her creeping around my bedroom, reading my private thoughts. My skin crawled. I texted Tom the videos. "Explain this," I wrote, attaching a short clip. He called me right away, breathing heavily. "I had no idea," he whispered, sounding horrified. But it was too little, too late. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. She insisted we file for a restraining order. I didn't hesitate. That same evening, I filed the paperwork. Part of me wondered, would Diane finally back off, or would this make her even more dangerous? The hearing for the restraining order arrived faster than I expected. I walked into the courthouse, clutching a folder of evidence. Diane was already there, wearing a stiff dress and glaring at me like I was dirt on her shoe. My lawyer presented the nanny cam footage. The judge's face tightened. He granted the restraining order, limiting Diane's contact with me and Liam. She had to stay away from my home, and could only see Liam if Tom supervised. The moment we stepped into the hallway, Diane exploded. Her voice echoed off the marble walls. "That child doesn't even look like my family. She's lying and everyone's too blind to see it." Security had to warn her to calm down. I stood there, my heart racing, but refusing to cower. Tom just stared at the floor, shame coloring his cheeks. That night, I went through some old family photos of Tom's that I'd saved on my phone. In one group picture, I noticed a man with hair almost the exact shade of Liam's. I zoomed in. He looked so much like my son that my breath caught. I asked Tom who. His answer made my stomach tighten. "Oh, that's Uncle Joe." Joe. Uncle Joe. I'd never heard much about him before. Apparently, he was Tom's father's younger brother, a big personality who rode motorcycles and traveled a lot. Tom said, "He died in a crash when I was in middle school. We weren't close, but he had this wild streak. My mom and dad always called him the rebel." I stared at the photo, my mind spinning. Joe's hair was that same deep coppery red as Liam's. He had the same curly texture. He even had a similar jawline. "Why has your mom been so obsessed with the idea that there's no redhead in your family?" I asked. It made no sense. Clearly, Uncle Joe existed. Tom shrugged, looking uneasy. "Mom never liked to talk about him. She said he was a black sheep who caused trouble." I couldn't shake the strange feeling in my gut. I decided to keep digging. If Joe was part of the family, why would Diane deny any redheaded relatives? That night, I lay awake, reading every bit of Tom's family history I could find, searching for the key to Diane's stubborn denial. I started quietly asking around. Tom's cousin Sarah was more than willing to talk. She had grown up hearing bits and pieces about Uncle Joe. He was super cool, Sarah recalled. He wore ripped jeans, listened to rock, and always had some rebellious streak going on. But the family distanced themselves. Mom said they felt embarrassed by his behavior. I asked if Joe ever visited after Tom was born. Sarah shook her head. Not really. He'd show up randomly with his motorcycle, wave hi, then leave. Then one day, we heard he died. That was that. She shrugged, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes, too. Joe was barely a memory, a shadow in family photos. Back at my apartment, I dug out a recent picture of Liam, his big grin, bright red hair, a tiny sparkle in his eyes. Then I placed it next to an old photo of Joe I'd found in a dusty box. The resemblance made my spine tingle. I started to suspect that Diane's resentment ran deeper than just no redheads in the family. It felt like she was hiding something about Joe's place in Tom's life. Over the next few days, I compared every old photo of Joe to pictures of Tom. I noticed that Tom actually shared small traits with Joe. His ears, the curve of his smile, traits he didn't share with the man he called Dad. It was subtle, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Why had I never noticed? Because I'd never even heard of Uncle Joe before, at least not in any detail. I confronted Tom. In a shaky voice, I asked, "Have you ever wondered why you don't look like your dad? Or why your mom is so weird about Uncle Joe?" He frowned. "I guess I thought I took after some great-grandparent. I didn't question it. Why would I?" But the truth was right there. Liam looked like Joe, and now I was seeing those same hints in Tom, a pattern that Diane clearly hated. The idea began to form in my mind. What if Tom's father wasn't who everyone thought? I knew we had to dig deeper. I couldn't let the question go. Tom was raised by a man with black hair, black eyebrows, and a strong chin. Tom's features didn't match as neatly as everyone assumed. One night, I found an old medical form Tom had lying around. It listed his blood type. I gasped. Tom's blood type shouldn't match if his dad's was different in certain ways. I remembered from basic biology that certain combinations are impossible. My mind raced. I sat Tom down, showed him the form, and asked, "What blood type is your dad?" He shrugged, then looked up records on his phone. Sure enough, it was incompatible with Tom's. The chances of them being father and son were looking slim. Tom's younger brother, Mark, was open to doing a sibling test. "I think it's weird too," he admitted, "but what can it hurt?" My heart pounded as the lab took their samples. If Tom and Mark came back as half-siblings, it would flip his entire world upside down. The sibling test results arrived by email in the morning. Tom read them first. His eyes went wide, mouth forming a silent "oh." He slowly passed his phone to me. They showed a high probability that Tom and Mark were half-siblings, not full. It was clear as day. Mark's father was indeed the man who raised them, but Tom's father had to be someone else. I watched Tom's face twist in confusion, anger, and hurt all at once. He whispered, "So, I'm Joe's son?" Those words felt electric. Suddenly, everything made sense. Diane's hostility about Liam's red hair, her constant suspicion. She'd spent years hiding a fact about Tom's true paternity, and now it was out in the open because she tried to accuse me of cheating. Tom stared at me, tears in his eyes. "This explains why I never looked like my dad, why I never fully fit in." He stood up, determination replacing his shock. "I have to confront Mom," he said firmly. I could only imagine the storm that would follow. Later that night, Tom went to Diane's house. I stayed home watching Liam sleep, my stomach a knot. When Tom finally called, his voice was low and tense. He recounted everything. As soon as he demanded the truth, Diane's face turned white. Then she broke down, tears streaming, admitting her affair with Uncle Joe. "I was young and stupid," Diane sobbed. "He was your dad's brother, but we were both reckless back then. I ended it before I realized I was pregnant. When you were born with black hair, I prayed you were your dad's child." Tom told me he could barely stand looking at her. She'd spent our entire marriage judging my character while hiding her own secret. "How could you throw Lena under the bus like that?" He'd shouted. Diane had no real answer. She just cried, begging him not to tell anyone. But it was too late. Everyone knew something was off already. Tom drove away in silence, leaving Diane sobbing on her porch. He told me on the phone. She used your pregnancy to cover her own guilt. I can't believe this. Diane's picture-perfect image cracked overnight. The woman who called me trash had built her life on a lie about Tom's father. All her viciousness, all her attempts to expose my so-called infidelity were just projections of her own guilt. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, reading texts from people who'd heard the rumors. My cousin wrote, "You realize she tried to ruin you because she was scared of her secret?" Yes, it was painfully clear now. The same woman who told me I was unworthy had no moral ground to stand on. I felt a strange mix of anger and pity. Tom came by later that evening, eyes red. We talked in hushed voices, replaying every moment Diane had meddled in our lives. She couldn't handle the possibility of a red-headed baby because it reminded her of Joe, Tom said quietly, gripping his coffee mug. Now that everything was out in the open, Tom and I both felt a strange sense of closure. At least about the truth. But our own relationship was still in tatters. I decided I couldn't keep living in this broken marriage. I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I filed for divorce that same week. It felt sudden, but in my heart, I'd already let go. Diane's actions had poisoned the marriage. Tom and I had once loved each other, but we couldn't go back to being the people we were before. The process was straightforward. We weren't fighting over possessions, just over Liam's well-being. Tom understood that I needed full custody until things settled. He agreed, not wanting to drag it out. Surprisingly, Diane tried to intervene, even writing a furious letter to my lawyer. She claimed I was alienating Tom from Liam, but that letter never went anywhere. The courts saw the restraining order, the false DNA claims, and the hidden camera footage. One day, a typed letter arrived at my door. It had no signature, but I recognized Diane's tone instantly. It said, "You will regret this. You are ripping my family apart." I read it once, my heart oddly calm. I placed it on the counter, letting its empty threats wash over me. I made a choice. I ripped the letter in half and tossed it in the trash, determined to let go of her poison for good. After the divorce was finalized, Diane's presence in my life turned into a background hum. She was still Tom's mother, so she existed on the sidelines, but I refused to engage. She texted sometimes, mostly with guilt trips or passive-aggressive remarks. I never replied. I felt a strange, quiet peace. Liam was healthy, growing every day. I had my routine, feeding him pureed veggies, taking him for stroller walks in the park, reading him silly board books. Tom, to his credit, stepped up as a co-parent. He asked permission before each visit, never barged in. He respected my boundaries, probably aware he had a lot to atone for. One afternoon he showed up with Liam's favorite toy, a stuffed monkey, and gently said, "I'm sorry for everything." His eyes glistened with real regret. But I was past needing an apology. I was ready to move on, leaving the old chaos behind. Later that night, Tom texted me, "Do you think I'll ever earn your trust again?" My chest tightened, but I wasn't sure how to answer. In the weeks that followed, Tom and I found a new rhythm. We arranged times for him to have Liam, Saturday mornings or one evening a week. He brought him back clean, fed, and happy. No drama, no blame. Sometimes I'd catch Tom watching me. His eyes held questions, maybe regrets. But neither of us tried to force a conversation that felt too big, too raw. We focused on what mattered, Liam's well-being. I gave Tom a binder of Liam's medical records and a schedule of checkups. He studied it, nodding. I want to be there for his vaccinations and everything else. It was such a simple statement, but it showed me he was serious about being a present father. The tension between us started to ease. With Diane under a restraining order, she couldn't just swoop in. Tom didn't even mention her much, other than to say he was keeping his distance. One evening, as he left with Liam's diaper bag, Tom turned and asked softly, "Will I ever get a chance to fix things with you? With us?" I bit my lip, unsure how to answer. I asked Tom to sit down for a serious talk. We put Liam in his playpen where he cooed happily with his toy blocks. Tom looked at me, hopeful and tense, but I spoke gently yet firmly. "You can be his dad. That's all I need from you right now." His shoulders dropped, disappointment flickering in his eyes. But he nodded. "I understand," he whispered. I could see he wanted more, a chance at rebuilding romance. But the damage was too deep. I told him I wasn't interested in rekindling anything. The betrayal of trust, the cowardice when Diane attacked me, it all left scars. He didn't protest or beg. He just nodded again, accepting the boundary. We agreed on co-parenting therapy, a space where we could talk about how to best raise Liam. We wanted him to have two supportive parents, even if we weren't together. Tom walked out with a quiet determination. A part of me felt relief. Another part felt sadness for what could have been. A few weeks later, I decided to share my story in a private parenting Facebook group. I changed names, left out specific details, but told the core truth. My mother-in-law had forced a false DNA test, accused me of cheating, and turned out to be hiding a secret about her own son's father. I didn't expect much beyond maybe some supportive comments. But people started flooding the thread with reactions. Some had gone through similar nightmares with in-laws or family members. Others were horrified by the lengths Diane had gone to. Soon my inbox was full of private messages. Women said, "Thank you for sharing. I feel less alone." Some described worse situations with controlling mother-in-laws. Others asked for advice. Then a local journalist messaged me, saying she was covering toxic family dynamics. She found my anonymous post heart-wrenching and wanted to interview me. I felt conflicted. Part of me was scared to open up more. Another part wanted to shine a light on these manipulative behaviors. I hesitated, reading the message over and over. Could telling my story on a bigger stage bring me healing? Or just more drama? A few days later, I wrote a more detailed anonymous post titled, "The Baby's Red Hair That Exposed a Family Secret." I explained the entire timeline, minus real names. I poured out the betrayal, the confusion, and the final revelation about Uncle Joe. To my shock, the post went viral within days. People shared it on social media, and comments poured in from everywhere. Some were outraged on my behalf, others admitted they'd once believed lies like Diane's. I started getting messages from podcasts, small online magazines, and even YouTube content creators who do storytime videos. Everyone wanted me to talk about it. It felt surreal. My life had become a cautionary tale of how far family secrets could go. I read through the comments late at night, sipping tea. Dozens of women wrote, "This is my story too," or "Thank you for being brave enough to say it." My heart pounded as I realized the story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every person who needed a reminder that truth has a way of coming out, no matter how deeply it's buried. Diane's control fizzled into nothing. The restraining order kept her away, and nobody believed her lies anymore, especially after Tom started quietly confirming that yes, indeed, his biological father was Uncle Joe. She became a ghost in my life, occasionally ranting on social media about ungrateful daughters-in-law and private family matters. But the damage was done. People saw through her. I heard from mutual acquaintances that she was sulking around trying to gather sympathy. But once the truth was out, it was like the wind left her sails. She couldn't hold her head high and pretend she was this perfect family matriarch. Meanwhile, I focused on healing. Liam reached new milestones, learning to crawl, babbling excitedly, smiling with that same spark I'd seen in Uncle Joe's old photos. It filled me with a sense of triumph. One morning, I woke up to an email from a local women's support group. They'd seen my post and wanted me to speak at an upcoming event about toxic family relationships. My stomach flipped. Was I brave enough to share my voice in person? The day of the support group event arrived. I stood behind a simple wooden podium, heart thudding in my chest. About 30 women sat in folding chairs, waiting for me to speak. I clutched the microphone with sweaty palms. Then I began, "Hi, I'm Lena. I want to share what it felt like to be falsely accused, how it all started with my baby's red hair." The room was quiet, but I saw heads nodding. I told them about Diane's paranoia, her secret DNA test, the lies spread through family. I explained how I discovered the truth about Tom's paternity. I ended with the message I'd learned the hard way. When someone obsesses over controlling your life, it usually means they've lost control over their own truth. As soon as I finished, applause erupted. A few women even stood. My eyes filled with tears. We broke into small groups, sharing personal stories. Some had mother-in-law tales, others had different toxic relatives, but the pain was universal. Driving home that night, I felt lighter, as if speaking my truth had sealed Diane's powerlessness once and for all. Months passed, and life felt calmer. I rented a small, cozy house with a fenced yard where Liam could play. I decorated with bright curtains and toddler art projects taped to the fridge. It felt like a real home, one not tainted by Diane's presence. Tom visited Liam regularly. We stuck to a schedule that let him be a consistent father figure. He never pushed beyond that. Part of me respected him more for it. We were no longer angry or resentful, just two people who shared a child. Sometimes, late at night, I'd remember the chaos Diane unleashed, how she tried to label me a cheater, publicly humiliate me. But then I'd hear Liam's tiny giggles in the next room, and I'd smile. We'd survived. One afternoon, Liam was playing with toy cars on the living room floor. Suddenly, he looked up at me and said, "Mommy, I like that I have red hair. It's special." I froze, tears pricking my eyes. He was only a toddler, but he sensed something unique. I scooped him into a hug, thinking of all the heartbreak that red hair had caused and all the amazing strength it had given us. That night, after Liam fell asleep, I tiptoed to his room. I looked at his sweet face, the soft glow of the nightlight catching those little red curls. My heart clenched with a deep, peaceful love. I tucked the blanket under his chin and whispered, "It makes you one of a kind, just like the truth." So much had changed since Diane first hissed those awful words. "We had your baby tested. He's not Tom's." In the end, the DNA test that was meant to break me ended up exposing her own lie, that Tom was secretly Uncle Joe's child. Her hypocrisy destroyed the life she worked so hard to control. Now there's no more fear, no more chaos. Tom and I are better as friends and co-parents than we ever were as husband and wife. Diane remains on the outskirts, stripped of her power to hurt us. People sometimes ask if I regret everything that happened. Honestly, I don't. It led me to find my voice, my boundaries, and a sense of peace I never had before. Final line. They tried to use a DNA test to break me. All they did was prove I was never the one with anything to hide.